Hi there. I had a request to discuss DMT and DMT experiences, and I'm going to do two videos. So if you're not interested in my thoughts on DMT, you can skip to the second video. First, I want to say DMT is not a drug that can be used for party, for recreation, for anything like that. So anybody that attempts to use it for that type of thing is probably not only going to be disappointed, but horrified and traumatized a great deal. It's considered a medicine and a religious sacrament by indigenous American cultures, and it has the potential, needless to say, to do great psychological harm outside of a medically supervised area. Now, I'm not an expert by any means, and this is only for educational and harm reduction purposes, so you should always consult a psychiatrist or a certified mental health professional before ingesting anything whatsoever. So, for fuck's sake, please tread carefully. Remember, life has no reset button. Now, that being said, ayahuasca means vine of the dead, and it consists frequently of a plant called Pagamen harmala, also known as Syrian rue, or another plant called Banisteriopsis caapi. These plants contain something called beta-carbolines. The plants are used to make DMT orally active. They have an MAOI in them. Normally DMT is broken down in the gut, but an MAOI can be used to make it orally active. Don't ask me why, I'm not a chemist. And Native Americans somehow figured this out in South America like 3,000 years ago. I think modern scientists just figured this out around 1970. So that's an interesting fact for you. So this is mixed together with some sort of plant-based source of DMT, dimethyltryptamine, from Psychotria viridis commonly, or other sources, since really just about everything living seems to have some amount of DMT in it. And you could even potentially make it out of the yard clippings and, from your grass and your front lawn. DMT seems to be present in humans, or at least in dead humans certainly, although this has been the source of great controversy, because anytime something unknown of this magnitude crops up in academia, it's always suppressed. Academics are really territorial, and they function just like the rest of society. Anybody with a job, the government, the military, they have this pyramid type top-down structure in which the academics on the top push down and oppress the people in the middle, and in return the people in the middle are forced to press down harder on the people in the bottom. The result is an academic environment which is not a tolerant environment, in which nobody will acknowledge a new finding without a protracted battle. So each academic is attempting to undermine the studies and the credibility and the financing of every other academic. But nonetheless, as Terence McKenna said, the presence of DMT in the human body could perhaps eventually be the source of a future lawsuit that would push for scientific drug research to be resumed in America, because we're all technically guilty of possession of the most potent psychedelic known to man, DMT, in our heads. So you can see the absurdity of outlawing a naturally occurring or endogenous substance in the human body. You've effectively removed the dignity of humanity. You've made the human body itself illegal. So this is an incredibly ignorant, obnoxious, and patronizing thing to do, and it just shows the extent to which police surveillance state is now in action. And I can only hope that by getting this type of information out there to the point where it just hits critical mass and it's openly understood by everyone in the population, then we can start to open up research into consciousness studies, which is potentially the most important and far-reaching study I think science has ever engaged in. Consciousness studies is an interdisciplinary study. It brings together all sorts of other sciences like biology and chemistry, pharmacology, quantum physics, and things like that. And it also has impacts on things that aren't science, like philosophy, psychology, anthropology, and religious and cultural studies. And DMT is such a unique and incredible drug and feared by the ignorant authorities, partly because of its chemical makeup. As I said, it's present in human beings. Humans actually have receptor sites for it in the brain, and it's presumed to be produced in the brain. In other words, it's endogenous to human beings, but not just to human beings. It's actually all around us in the environment. And I think that's one of the reasons why authorities want to keep this type of information suppressed, because what does it say when the authorities are outlawing something that's present in everything all around us? Easily obtained. You don't have to be a chemist or a laboratory rat to get this, So it's it occurs in large concentration in some plants, and when it's smoked or injected under a laboratory setting, it's so quickly absorbed that it only lasts about 10 minutes at the longest. Because it's endogenous like cannabinoids, active ingredients in marijuana, it's probably physically safer than taking an aspirin. But psychologically, this is the most powerful psychedelic experience currently known to man. What's remarkable and unique about DMT is that you retain your cognitive faculties, unlike with LSD or one of these other powerful entheogens that just feels like it's poisoning you, and that's why it is creating this altered state. DMT, because it's endogenous, it's not poisoning you. In my opinion, the reason that DMT is so highly illegal is because it's present all around us, and it's incredibly safe, physically at least, and incredibly psychologically transformative. And the authorities believe that this has to be kept under wraps because, like all entheogens, these drugs do not reinforce consumer values, they do not reinforce consumer ideals, or they don't reinforce a social structure that consists of domination by these pyramid-type hierarchies. They break down traditionally held assumptions like social mores and religious ideas, and it encourages creation of new ways and new patterns of thinking. Rick Strassman, Dr. Rick Strassman from New Mexico, who wrote this book, DMT, The Spirit Molecule, really sort of risked his career and made himself into a target for doing this study. He was really asking for it. It's called DMT, The Spirit Molecule, his book. And in this book, all of his colleagues think he's gone insane. They laugh at this idea that perhaps one of the functions of the pineal gland was to produce this DMT in the body, which has been referred to by many, esotericists and New Agers and Eastern religions, the pineal gland, as the third eye, or the sixth chakra, the Ajna chakra. It's my opinion that DMT is integrally linked in some way or another to sound, the vibrations that make up sound, because in the actual DMT experience itself, it allows us to interact with sounds in a very visual, synesthetic way. But not like LSD, it's different. The songs of the Icaros, the shaman who have used this DMT for thousands of years, have these songs that are designed to evoke visual images through sounds, and they tell stories by guiding the visionary experience. So if you look at these indigenous paintings, you'll see pictures of the shaman actually speaking, and colors and words are actually coming out of his mouth. Not words, colors and images are actually coming out of his mouth, physical images. He's actually speaking physical images. Let's see. Because our brains have these receptors and potentially produce the DMT, perhaps in dreams or perhaps at birth and death, it's so important because it demonstrates the human brain is capable of transcendental experiences in and of itself naturally, and that every human being, and maybe even some types of animals, may have this inherent ability built into them. So whether or not this is an ability that can be tapped into and brought out into everyday life through various types of training, or if this is an ability that the ancestors of human beings may have had at one point and lost, maybe because it didn't contribute to their biological survival in their environment. Whether or not any of those speculations are true, we don't know. But the fact remains that DMT is found in living beings, and that our brain has receptors for DMT. And that, although Strassman was blackballed in academia for suggesting that DMT was produced somehow in the human pineal gland, these speculations have given rise in New Age communities and underground communities, fringe people and fringe groups, that DMT is a molecule that may be responsible for governing the spiritual, the otherworldly, maybe even the alien abduction experience, or the demonic or angelic experience, religious experiences. But I think most likely, most credible, is the near-death experience, because it may actually perform some type of survival function. So this seems to be a part of us, and it's found in the human body after death. So it's been theorized to be a chemical that serves the function of the near-death experience. And the fact that we still have a near-death experience built into us after so much evolution shows that there is an evolutionary benefit to it in some way or another. That those people who evolved with a near-death experience built in were somehow more fit to survive in the environment that they adapted to, in that niche. And the fact that we still have it shows perhaps maybe this experience calms a person who's on the verge of death as he mentally leaves his body. Perhaps it gives the person a better chance of surviving a critical wound rather than having a person remain in his body during that time and begin to panic and run around and have his blood pressure go up, and he'll be more likely to die. So maybe if a person is critically wounded, this chemical kicks in and they start to fly down this tunnel. They go have the out-of-body experience. They're comforted. The autonomic nervous system takes over, and it keeps this person alive if he is to survive, or makes him a little bit more likely, that tiny percentage more likely to survive than the person without that DMT reflex. So regardless of all the speculation, though, for esotericists and seekers and psychonauts, this is it. This is the Holy Grail. And it's a direct initiation into the mysteries. It's a two-way ticket out of the wake world and into the night side, into the dream, the flip side of the coin of life that is perpetually facing down to us in this mundane consciousness, or so-called mundane consciousness. And so when ingesting DMT, it seems as though we're leaving the physical causal realm and we're entering a place of release where causation breaks down, where time and space breaks down, and all energy breaks down into a kind of language. We physically die and leave our bodies, and we leave behind our memories and our identities just for a short time, and we move into this space that seems totally parallel to our reality, and yet it seems to have almost no relation to it in terms of its physical laws. So how can we explain something like this, where it appears as though we're dreaming or hallucinating, and yet all of our faculties still appear to be intact? It appears as though we've taken no drug at all. We have no side effects, no poisoning feeling like you would with a normal entheogen. It seems as though we're still perceiving reality identically to the way that we were when we were in our mundane consciousness, but everything else around us has been changed. It's as if all the scenery is suddenly sucked out, and what it is replaced with is something totally foreign and bizarre, as if we've just been transported into this outer realm, this interdimensional realm, bizarre place, and we're just standing there looking at it, completely baffled by, what is this? It's almost exactly like being in a lucid dream. If you've ever had a lucid dream where suddenly you're awake in the dream and you realize this is not reality, and yet it is. Here I am, and I can create reality. I can manifest things with my mind. I'm conscious, but it's not a physical reality. There are no laws here. Everything breaks down. So some experts explain this DMT phenomenon by stating that the visible light spectrum that we live in physical beings and interact with our senses within is far less than just 1% of all of the energy in the electromagnetic spectrum, which is just, massive, so massive that we can't comprehend it, compared to the narrow range of vibrations and frequencies, the energy that we can perceive, that we have evolved to perceive. And so my theory is that maybe somehow the DMT experience allows us to tune in to a different frequency range that we would normally not perceive, because it would be detrimental to our survival if we were seeing that. We would be less tuned in to the physical needs of eating and drinking and providing for ourselves in the physical reality. And maybe at some point we had the ability to tune in to this other type of consciousness. Maybe some animals tune into this type of consciousness because the shamans say that this gives them the consciousness of a jaguar, or gives them the consciousness of a lizard, or some type of animal. So because we're naturally interacting with such a small sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, to say that all that is in this little narrow reality tunnel is all that exists, it's all that we can see and touch and hear, is really all that exists, it's more than just arrogant and presumptuous. That's actually a dangerous attitude, because attitudes like this contribute to the banning of scientific research, to the burning of books, and to things like the Spanish Inquisition, and now this new Inquisition in academia and in the US government, which has blocked out all consciousness research and the research on these remarkable substances that will inevitably revolutionize the way that we think about psychology, about consciousness, about disorders like PTSD, for example, and things like that. These attitudes of ignorance create irrational social constructs like the academic hierarchies I talked about earlier. These things stifle new ideas, and they suppress and ridicule deep thinkers in return for keeping bureaucrats in their tenured positions. And despite what the social architects and the lawmakers and the hang-wringing reactionaries and church officials stuck in the 15th century want you to believe, there are many, many ways to alter our reality. Reality is not a black and white construct. It is put together by a evil, blind, clockwork demiurge like the church wants you to believe. Reality is plastic, and in fact there may even be totally different parallel dimensions. Dimensions parallel to our membrane, as I guess they call it in quantum physics, that exist outside of our day-to-day perceptions. And perhaps these can be accessed as simply as you could by turning a television switch. Maybe DMT represents the ability to change that channel. It's a total rupturing of the mundane plane of your current reality, and through this portal we venture into a different world. Perhaps it's a world inside of the mind and the unconscious. Perhaps it's a world outside of this one, a world behind the curtain of reality, where we go deep into the machinery, into what McKenna called the invisible landscape, this thing at work, and we get a glimpse of the gears that are turning behind the causal events that govern our everyday lives. There are energetic interactions outside the realm of our everyday perceptions which govern reality, and we're incapable of perceiving these interactions because they're so infinite and numerous and maddening that if we could just see into this invisible landscape for more than a few moments, we would just be totally overwhelmed. We would have no way to function or to provide for ourselves, like to eat or clothe ourselves, like I said earlier. Can you imagine what it would be like if you were permanently on an LSD trip or something like that, for example? It would just be impossible to survive. And yet that is what your brain is capable of. Your brain is capable of creating all of these infinite perceptions, and yet your brain has narrowed it down to just one, your reality tunnel, so that you're capable of surviving. But these drugs give us a glimpse outside of that tunnel, whereas normally we're looking through this little scope. Suddenly it blows that scope wide open, and we can see every single perspective and perception. And so it seems as though maybe our bodies, biologically, our minds, our brains, have evolved to perceive selectively, to block out phenomena in reality that have no direct value in helping us survive as physical beings in a material reality. So again, we've either evolved in a way that blocks out and excludes the majority of the information in reality, so that allows us to focus on what we need to accomplish for survival and reproduction. But we become so accustomed to our civilization, our little virtual reality that we've created through society. We've become too enwrapped in this narrow reality tunnel. We forget that, as Shakespeare said in Hamlet, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. So DMT gives us a glimpse outside of this normal reality tunnel, out of our conditioned paradigm of thought. It's a look behind what is occurring, perhaps. McKenna did a great lecture called The World and Its Double, where he discusses DMT and its implications. I advise you to listen to that if you're really interested in going into it in a lot more depth than I can. Also, just a quick add-on, 5-MeO-DMT is not the same as DMT. Zach Black did a video on DMT, 5-MeO-DMT. I would say don't take 5-MeO if you can avoid it, because it's not going to give you the same type of effects, and it can be mentally detrimental to you. McKenna said 5-MeO is like radio compared to actual DMT, which is like a full 3D movie. So it's the full thing. I would just stay away from 5-MeO, but I would stay away from DMT also. You know, like I said, consult a professional first. Be very careful. Don't do anything that'll get you in trouble. And stay alert, stay alive. There's no reset button to reality, so be very careful. Take care.